Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is overpower. This verb was suggested by the viewer Luis. Luis, thank you so much for sharing another great idea. Now let's take a moment and review some of the ways that we can use this verb. The first way you may encounter the verb overpower means to defeat or overcome with superior strength. So here we're really thinking of someone kind of being physically strong and powerful. And with this particular definition, I think you will hear and see many instances used in athletic competitions, so sports. I think you can find many instances where people are talking about battles and wars. And again, we'll encounter this particular verb being used, and it connects there to that first definition. Now, a second way you might encounter overpower can mean to be too intense for someone or something. Could also mean to overwhelm. With this second definition, what came to my mind, and this happened to me recently, I was in a particular place and someone with a very strong cologne walked into the room, and it felt like that cologne was just hitting me in the face. And maybe something like that has happened with you, perhaps a perfume or a cologne. So that smell was just, or that scent, I should say, was just way too intense for me. A third way you might encounter overpower is used in connection with machines. Um, this could be something that's mechanical. Anytime we're supplying excessive power to that object, again, we might encounter this verb. And you'll notice our verb overpower here contains the prefix over, O-V-E-R, which can mean more than what is needed. For now, you should know that overpower is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms overpowering. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. The base verb, overpower, ends in a voiced R sound. This means our ed ending is just going to make a d or d sound. I'm not going to add an extra syllable to the word when I say it. The past tense and the participle form of our verb should sound like this: overpowered, overpowered. Now, I don't have any phrasal verbs that we need to study, so we can move on and do a little verb tense practice. Today, I thought we could review the past progressive and the simple past tense. Let's start with the past progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that were ongoing at a point in the past. Now, some teachers and textbooks will call this the past continuous, and that's just fine. It means exactly the same thing. The reason I say past progressive is that sometimes it helps my students remember they're going to need two parts to make their verb. We're going to be using a past form of be. That's going to be the first part of our verb. And be has two forms in its past, so this is a verb tense where we need to pay attention to our subject. If the subject is I, he, she, or it, use was, W-A-S, and then the ing form of the verb. If your subject is you, we, or they, use were, W-E-R-E, and then the ing form the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The younger council members felt as though others were overpowering their voices in meetings. Right? So here we might be talking about that, like too intense, overwhelming. Maybe they're being talked over. Now let's talk about making negative sentences in the past progressive. To do this, again, pay attention to your subject. You want to use the past form of be that matches, then not, and then your ing form of the verb. Here's another example. This book had romantic parts, but they weren't overpowering the main storyline too much. So again, there's a meaning of not too intense. It's not taking away or distracting us from that main storyline. Finally, If you want to make a yes or no question in the past progressive, start with the past form of be. Whatever form matches your subject, that subject comes next, then use the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Was the team overpowering opponents all season? It's going to go back to our first definition. Now, let's take a look at simple past tense sentences. We use the simple past tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at a known point in the past. And the nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense is that our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, or to make a positive simple past tense sentence, you want to start with your subject, and then we'll be using that ed form of our regular verb here. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The suspect overpowered the victim during the struggle and stole the car's keys. Okay, so here, maybe this is part of a story that's in a newspaper, some other type of media describing a particular crime that had taken place at a particular time. Not every sentence in the simple past tense will have that time signal telling us the known time. It can be implied as part of a longer passage as well. Now let's talk about making negative simple past tense sentences. To do this, again, start with your subject, use did not, but then use the base verb. So here we're not using the ed form of the verb in the negative. Here's another example. The hot sauce was potent enough to make my lips tingle, but it didn't overpower the flavor of the sandwich. I borrowed this sentence from a particular restaurant critic's review. So they were describing the particular dishes they had tasted, and so here this particular sauce was not too intense. It didn't overwhelm. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, start with did, then you want to have your subject, and then the base verb. An example of this might be, did the fumes from the gas leak overpower people? Again, this might be a little similar to that cologne example I mentioned in the beginning, kind of that idea of a really strong smell here taking over, being too intense, possibly in this case, since it's gas, maybe even making someone ill. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb overpower. The first word we're going to discuss today is overpowering, but I have a typo, and I'm so sorry when this happens. But overpowering here, we're going to be using it as an adjective. And when we use this adjective, it means extremely strong or intense. Another way to think of this, overwhelming. You can use it in a pretty similar way. So an example of this might be, there is an overpowering odor coming from that room. Overpowering is describing the noun odor in that particular sentence. Related to this is the adverb overpoweringly. So now we're describing either a verb or an adjective, and we're describing something done in a way that is too strong or too intense. An example of this might be, some say cars' new headlights have become overpoweringly intense. So I don't know if you've had this experience at all recently, but there have been some times where I've been driving at night and a car approaching from the opposite direction, their lights, gosh, nearly blind me. And so that's what's meant by too strong or too intense. So again, quick review here. Overpowering should be an adjective, overpoweringly an adverb. Luis, thanks again for suggesting today's verb. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day.